Hello, welcome to this episode of Title Talk with Lora Rosenthal. Any information given on this podcast is not legal advice, and we are not liable for any action taken but based upon this information. Today's episode is about title reports. Please go ahead, Laura.
Lora Rosenthal from Touchdown Abstract Services. I'm President and CEO. Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about what is a title report. In the last episode, we talked about getting into contract, and that's after you have already formulated a confirmed purchase price from the seller. And we're going to do this podcast based upon the buyer's perspective. So the title report is a accumulation of data regarding the property for a period of 40 to 60 years. Why do you ask we go back so far? It is because we need to advise all parties of all open mortgages, judgments, and liens of record, as well as municipal searches that would affect the buyer's title. Now, the buyer's title is defined as the buyer's deed, because we want the deed to be free and clear of all liens and possible interest. So the first item you're going to see on the title report is the title commitment page. It just indicates who the title insurer is, as well as all the liability obligations that the title insurance company stands behind the abstract which the title company prepares. Title abstracts is basically abstracting and obtaining open mortgages, judgments, and liens of record, because you as a purchaser should not be ever responsible for the seller's debts and liabilities. So page 3 is normally what is called the Schedule A. The Schedule A defines what the property address is, what the district, section, block, and lot. The district, section, block, and lot defines exactly where your property exists on a tax map. A tax map is like, for instance, you have a big square, and then you cut up the square to little pieces, and each piece is the person's home. So you don't want to be responsible for your neighbor's mortgage. That's why it's very important that all documents are recorded properly against the correct district, section, block, and lot. So you have to think the bigger picture. Say you live in the town of Islip, and the town of Islip includes Bayshore, West Islip, Islip Terrace, Islip, Great River, for an example, and Brightwaters. So that's a big square. But how do we find your house? So we go district, it's 0800, which is for every township. Section now becomes a smaller area. Block, another smaller area on the map. And now you have your lot, which is your home and the meets and bounds of your home. So you have to think about the district, section, block, and lot going bigger to smaller to actually pinpoint where you are. Also on page Schedule A, you will find that the proposed insured, which will be the buyer's names, and that defines who the owner's policy is going to be issued to. The next section will be proposed insured. That will be the loan policy. If there is a mortgage, say Bank of America, it would say Bank of America because that will be the lender. Then on the same page, the title company certifies who is currently on the deed. That's called source of title. So for instance, if Mrs. and Mrs. Cooper was going to be the purchasers, they would not be the source of title just yet, not until they had paid off Mrs. and Mrs. Mano. So how did Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. Mano obtain title? That means how did they get their deed to the property? So that's what defines as source of title. So there you will also see an effective date on that page. Effective date means the date in which the county clerk is certifying their records to. Because documents are always being submitted to the county clerk for recording, and the day you walk in with a document doesn't always mean the date that document will be either filed or recorded. So that date will be updated prior to closing. The next page you would normally see would be Schedule A, legal description. Just like I indicated before, you have your district, section, block, and lot. Your bigger parcel, smaller, smaller, smaller. But now this page defines what is your meets and bounds. Your frontage, your length of your property, the back of the property, back up the side of property, and back to square one. So basically, whether it be a square, a rectangle, an odd shape, it begins at a point, running thence, goes another distance, running thence. And it could be very long, your legal description, when not all properties are perfectly square, perfectly rectangle. So that defines what you actually own. Then you're going to have what is called a Schedule B. These are the exceptions to the title report. Items in which the title company raises in order to clear the title. Some of them are just generalized, just like any other insurance policy, but your attorney should be actually reading them because certain items are very important, such as the mortgages returned. Mortgages or mortgage. Returned means what is currently on the property, what mortgage is currently recorded that has not been satisfied of record. That is very important because, like I said previously, you as a buyer do not want to assume any type of liabilities or debts of the seller. And how is the seller going to take care of it? Well, 70% of the time, it is the current mortgage that the sellers are paying. Not a problem. They order a payoff letter and they have it for closing and it gets paid at the closing table with the proceeds. Where it becomes difficult is when there's mortgages from the prior owner that was not owed by the current owner. So that will require the title company to do more investigation. And we will go into that at a later time. Some other items is whether or not the buyer or the seller has judgments against them. Just like in my prior podcast where I talked about what are the types of judgments. Now those judgments could be from credit cards, medical liens, any type of debt owed that you didn't pay, including red light tickets, parking tickets, if you got in trouble with the law and you had to pay a victim's fine and you didn't pay it, that becomes a judgment as well. Yes, indeed, red light tickets become judgments that must be paid at or prior to closing. So this also turned, now if you said that you paid that credit card off and that attorney did not file a document called a satisfaction of judgment, that warrants more investigation. Now, your attorney should be contacting that judgment creditor when you have provided to your attorney the proof to obtain a satisfaction of judgment. Most parking tickets can be paid online, as well as most criminal judgments can also be paid directly at the court. So it does require you as the buyer to do some legwork as well. Something that should not be ignored. Also contained within the Schedule B will be your covenants, restrictions, and easements of record. Now, what is an easement? And I had spoke about that in the beginning. An easement allows someone who doesn't own your property access to your property for a particular reason. Now, this reason could be for utilities. So that means the water company is allowed to come onto your property to run water lines. It could be the electrical lines. It could be also anything regarding a sidewalk, a sewage, a drainage, something that allows usually a governmental body or someone else access to your property that you don't normally have. Now, if it is for example, a driveway easement, two homes that have to share a driveway, that's called a driveway easement, which is very common when it's situated where homes are maybe too close to each other, or one home is behind each other. So that means that you cannot block that driveway nor disrupt the use of that driveway by your neighbor. Well, simultaneously, if you're purchasing a house and there's a driveway easement turned out in title, you're entitled to use that driveway easement as well. That we'll cover also in another podcast. Also, we'll find out whether or not the taxes are open, and we'll have to deal with that as well. And then we also, in the report, we will find out anything else that the title company feels that is necessary to allow the buyers and sellers to make decisions on. And one of the very common items that we find is called a UCC 1, which is a Uniform Commercial Code filing against a piece of personal property that is secured by the collateral, which means secured by the home, which most commonly right now is your solar panels, where you need to find out if those solar panels, and you as the buyer must ask your attorney to obtain from the seller's attorney a copy. Is it a loan? Is it a lease? Are they paid off? What are the warranties? This should always be discussed prior to or at contract stage. And we're going to be going into solar panels at another podcast. So once again, mortgages. So we have your conventional mortgages. You order a payoff letter, you're done, we're good. Now you also have home equity lines of credit that must be closed out prior to the closing date, because you don't want the seller continuing to draw out on his or her credit line, becoming a lien against the property, and it ends up in foreclosure. So it's very important that you're asking and being informed as a consumer, asking your attorney, was the credit line closed out? And your attorney can find this out by also reading the title report. And you as a purchaser, since you're paying for the title report, you should be informed and you should be given the title report. Also, let's talk about the title report is going to turn out what is called the taxes, and what the situation right now is the taxes. And as of today, the taxes are paid in, say, for instance, Suffolk County through November 30th. So if you are closing, say, January 1st taxes are due by January 10th without penalty. So you have to take that in consideration when the taxes are due when you're going to purchase and close. The seller is entitled to what is called a tax adjustment at closing for the period of time that you will be occupying the home during the paid tax period. Your attorney can further go over the adjustments with you prior to closing. Also, the title report will turn out what is the situation with the water liens. Yes, unpaid water becomes a lien against the property at time of closing. Suffolk County Water Authority has the ability for title companies to check online to see what the status of that water is. Not all properties are located within the Suffolk County Water District Authority. So you would be prudent to find out from your attorney and ask them where the water account is. Also, you have turns out a certificate of occupancy search. A certificate of occupancy is issued by the town that regulates building of homes. So it will say whether or not your one family dwelling with like a 2-car detached garage, and whether or not there are any other structures on the property that required a permit, and then therefore was reviewed and approved by the town, and a certificate of occupancy was issued. Also, any type of housing and building violations, that could be if it was a vacant house and there was high grass and the town came by and they cut it down, whether or not there was illegal unregistered cars parked on the property, and this must be cleared up prior to the closing by the seller, because you as a buyer do not want to be responsible for any debts or liabilities of the seller. Also, the report will say whether or not the property is in a sewer district. Not every block on Long Island is in a sewer area, and then you will get a separate bill for that. So also, we will find out making sure that nobody's in bankruptcy, no one is a foreign national, and also, like I said, the physical copies of the judgments would be part of the report. So those are judgments are run against the buyers and sellers, and sometimes a person of similar name may be turned out, and then the title company is going to ask you for proof that that person is not you. So it's very important that you speak to your attorney during the buying process to make sure that he or she has reviewed the title report and that there is no issues. So it's very important too that the report contains also the copy of all these documents, and you should sit down with your attorney and review it. So that is any questions or concerns. If you are a buyer and you're not quite sure if your attorney is informing you about the title report, please reach out to me, Lora Rosenthal, 631-224-7196. You also can find me on this concludes my podcast for this episode. Please tune in next week for more Title Talk with Lora Rosenthal. Our podcast can be found on our website or your streaming platform of choice. Thank you.